Raised beds are a great way to start your new organic garden. Welcome back to the Garden Hutch. Today we're going to discuss a few ways that you can fill your organic raised beds. Let's get going. The first thing you need to consider when deciding on how to fill your raised bed is how deep is your actual bed. So here at the Garden Hutch, we have a few different sizes of raised beds. So we're gonna take a look at those and let you know how we filled them and give you a couple extra ideas that may be appropriate for your situation. So these are our pallet beds, and they're the tallest of the raised beds that we have here. I did a video when we built them, in fact, that'll kind of show you how we filled them, and I'll put that here above. But the way we did these, you can see they have quite a bit of depth to them. So to fill these with organic matter, what we did was we had several trees that we had to cut down. So we cut the trunks of those trees into pieces. We filled the bottom of them with those. We also used larger branches that had fallen to fill the bottoms. And then in the gaps between those things, what we did was we took some of the wood chips that we had delivered. You can see those, what's left of them anyway, right up there. We took those and we filled in the gaps. And then we put about a ½ inch to an inch layer of straw on top of that. And the straw was merely there as sort of a boundary, just in case any of those wood chips or anything had weed seeds in them. And it also helps maintain the moisture throughout the year in your raised beds. One of the things to consider with your raised beds is they will, in the summertime when it's warm, here in zone 7B, it'll generally warm up. When I say warm up, I mean over 90. Usually around middle of July, all the way through sometimes middle of September. So you've got to keep that in mind, how you're going to make sure that your raised beds don't dry out, because whenever they're up off the ground, of course, the same reason that they warm up sooner in the wintertime is the same reason that they lose their moisture faster in the summer. So the more organic matter that can be saturated in the bottom of these raised beds, the better off you're going to be come those times of year. And we found that the straw, the wood chips, and the tree trunks, they really work well in conjunction with each other, and we don't have to water these raised beds much more often than we do our in-grounds because of that. Before we move on to the shorter beds, one thing I'd like to bring up about the pallet beds is you can also use things like larger stones, you can use cinder blocks, you can use almost any organic material, even some non-organic if you want to. Just make sure they don't have any paraffins or anything that could leach into your soil and then eventually get into your food. Again, the reason that we prefer to use things like the tree branches or the cut up pieces of a log, that sort of thing, is because it does offer soil retention, whereas, things like the stones and that sort of stuff, they don't offer that. Now, the next raised bed that we're going to discuss are these shorter raised beds that we built in here this year. Now, when we went to fill these, they have a bit more options when it comes. A lot of it is how deep are they? And then if that's the case, for us, what we used was we had topsoil that we had moved to sort of level it out a little bit. And I had built that up in the middle. So we already started off with, a couple, 2-3 inches of topsoil just from the surrounding area. And while that soil's not great, it does drain relatively well, and it's organic, so it's a good start. And on top of that, what we did was we placed about 4 inches of mulch that we put in there. And again, the reason for the mulch is this clay soil does not hold water very well. So whenever we put the mulch on that mulch is going to soak that up, and it's going to give, I guess for lack of a better term, a water reservoir for us during the summertime. These beds, the pros and cons, right? Well, the cons are they don't quite warm up near as fast as the pallet beds that we looked at earlier. The advantage is they hold water a little better because they don't have as much exposure outside of the dirt for them to warm up past what the soil temperature is. So again, those are, you know, pros and cons. It'll be really good for our cabbages because we're going to start those soon. And it'll be more of a challenge for things like our tomatoes whenever the summertime rolls through and it's August and we're trying to keep them alive for, you know, another picking or two. But again, it'll retain more than our pallet beds, but not, you know, it won't retain as much as if it was in the ground by itself. There's a few different ways when we discuss filler for these beds. Again, you can use the native soil, which is what we did at the bottom of them. Then we used the mulch on top of that, and then we put in the compost. So now is a good time to sort of talk about the compost that you put on top of it. As a general rule here at the Garden Hutch, we like to have 6 to 10 inches of compost for our plants to grow in. Now you can put in topsoil if you want with just a couple inches of compost. The reason we do it this way is because eventually it'll all be compost from top to bottom, right? Like we put in the 6 to 10 inches of compost on the top, and then we cover it with the leaves, and then below that is the mulch. And over time, as the microbes process and they grow your plants and break things down, that bottom, you know, I don't know, 6 inches or so is going to turn into mulch. So as time goes on, you're not going to have to add mulch and as much nutrients to your beds. And that is going to save you time. It can also save you a big headache in the middle of the summertime if you do not have organic fertilizer that has been put in your soil, because then you have to resort to using a chemical fertilizer, or you have to add an organic fertilizer and give your microbes the 2 to 3 weeks it needs to make the nutrients available to the soil. So having the bottom part of it composting throughout the entire process is to your advantage if you can do it. But if you're on a budget, or if you don't have availability of the wood chips, like we use those because they were free, right? But if you don't have that, you can be proactive in the springtime and just add more components to your compost for your microbes to break down that will last you through the season. You just have to be a bit more cognizant of that from the start. Now, before we move on from these specific beds, I would like to say that you can use leaves. Now, anybody who watches this channel knows the Garden Hutch uses leaves for dadgum near everything. The only caution that I would give you when adding leaves, especially if you're using them for a filler and you're going to put an abundance of them in there, is one, make sure the leaves have dried out to where whenever you grab them and kind of ball them up, they'll crunch together. And when you add them, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to crunch them up and make sure that there's a lot of air in your leaves when you add them in there. The reason for that is if you put them in there either A, when they're fresh off the tree, or B, if you lay them flat, what'll happen is it will create a waterproof barrier over time, and then you're going to end up with the very situation you're trying to prevent with your organic matter. I like to kind of equate it to sort of your gutters, right? And when your leaves get pressed all in the bottom, like over the top of your gutters, the water will back up and it'll come out. And the reason for that is because leaves, when they're put like that, they're not porous enough to allow the water to go through. So I did want to add that. You're more than welcome to use leaves as filler. It's a great substitute for the wood chips if you have enough of them. Just make sure you don't lay them flat, and when you put them in there, you crumble them and allow air pockets so that your water, when the time comes, your water will be able to drain through your bed. Well, now we've discussed the taller and the shorter raised beds. The last thing that I really want to go over as far as the beds are concerned are specialty beds. We created these, we dug the holes, and we created the acidic soil for these, and we've sort of gone through, added potash right before rain a few times to make sure that the acidity level is what we're looking for. Now, we're not going to plant these these blueberries this year. We're going to allow them this soil to cure until the fall, and then we'll get our blueberry bushes in, and we will plant all 6 of them out here in the fall for going into the next year. But it's important to understand, as we said earlier, what are we going to plant in these beds? So because the blueberries love acidic soil, for us it was important to sort of give them their own environment where we could control the acidity. And that's another reason why we used the raised beds. And we had talked about this in last week's vlog, I believe, but we did the very same thing with our garlic. We cured it specifically with the phosphorus that it needs to grow, that sort of thing. We also did the pH just slightly above acidic. And the reason we did that is because, well, we love garlic and we wanted to make sure that we got a lot of it. And so for us, it was worth the effort to build a very specific area for it. So when you are going to do your raised beds, if you know that you want something specific, whether it be garlic or onions, are another one that do really good in a specific bed because you can also control the phosphorus levels. But that's another thing to consider whenever you're doing. If you want something specific, just take the time to research the soil pH and the needs of that specific plant. And the beauty of the raised beds is you can control it in that environment and give your plants exactly what they need, so you get the best out of what you have. As always, I would like to say thank you to those of you that have made it this far. If you have not, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can hit the little bell icon and YouTube will let you know when we update new content. Also, if you like this content, consider giving it a like. Until next time, I hope you folks take care of yourselves. Peace.